It always starts the same way. She looks at you, not as you are, but as who you might become. There's something in her eyes, hope, admiration, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's hunger. You think you're being truly seen, but you're not. You're being scanned, weighed, measured. Not as a man, but as raw material. A role waiting to be cast. A puzzle piece she hopes will fit into the picture she's already built in her mind. And at first, it feels amazing. That feeling of being chosen, wanted, special. But Carl Jung warned us, this isn't love. This is projection, a psychological illusion. She's not loving you. She's loving the idea of you. A fantasy she didn't even know she created. And once you stop playing the part, once your edges no longer fit the mold she imagined, she won't rewrite the story. She'll just replace the actor. Jung didn't whisper this truth. He carved it into the foundation of modern psychology. And if you don't understand what he saw in the shadows of the human soul, you'll spend your life trying to be the man someone else imagined, never the one you actually are. Carl Jung spent his life exploring the deepest, darkest parts of the human mind, not the surface-level stuff. He wasn't interested in what people said. He was obsessed with what they didn't say, with what hid beneath the masks, the dreams, the instincts we pretend don't control us. And what he found terrified him. Jung called it the unconscious. A powerful inner world silently shaping everything we do. And one of the most dangerous forces he uncovered, projection, that invisible habit of seeing what we want to see in other people instead of who they actually are. We don't fall in love with others. We fall in love with our ideas of them, and then we punish them when they don't live up to the fantasy. This wasn't just theory to Jung. He saw it play out over and over in relationships, especially romantic ones. He noticed how women, without realizing it, would project an idealized version of man onto someone, casting him as hero, savior, father, rebel, God. But it wasn't him. It was never him. It was an inner image being forced onto a real human being. And the damage, it cuts both ways. Men, eager to be loved, step right into the role. They become what she wants, or what she thinks she wants, until the mask slips, until the script breaks, and suddenly he's not the man of her dreams. He's the man who failed her fantasy. This is where the heartbreak begins, not in rejection, but in the realization that love never even started. It was theater from the first look. And Jung saw it with a clarity most of us spend our whole lives trying to avoid. Jung didn't just talk about projection, he mapped its architecture. Deep inside every woman, he said, lives something ancient and powerful. He called it the Animus, the masculine part of a woman's unconscious mind. Just like men carry the Anima, their hidden inner feminine, women carry the Animus, and when it's unconscious, immature, or distorted, it becomes something far more dangerous than people want to admit. The Animus isn't just a psychological concept, it's a voice, a force. It tells her what a man should be, it judges, it commands, it moralizes, and when left unchecked, it doesn't guide her, it possesses her. Jung called it a form of spiritual possession. A woman, under the grip of a toxic animus, doesn't love a man. She uses him to act out an inner drama she doesn't even realize she's trapped inside. This force can make her idealize the bad boy, reject the kind one, argue without logic, and dominate without wisdom. Not because she's evil, but because she's unaware. She's acting from a script written by generations of unspoken expectations, childhood fantasies, emotional wounds, and the ghost of the men she's never actually known. She says she wants connection, but the Animus wants control. She says she's looking for love, but the Animus is chasing a symbol. That's why no man is ever enough. That's why the moment you stop being mysterious, unpredictable, untamed, she loses interest. Because the Animus isn't interested in the real, it feeds on illusion. And men, we fall right into it. We're flattered by her attention. We confuse being wanted with being valued. We mistake her fantasy for genuine affection. And before we know it, we're not living our lives, we're acting in hers. Jung wasn't cruel in his warning. He was precise. The Animus is not the enemy. But if a woman doesn't face it, doesn't tame it, it will use every man she meets as a mirror. Not to reflect who he is, but to reflect back the war she refuses to fight inside herself. Most men never see it coming. They think they've finally been seen, finally been understood. She says the right things, looks at him like he matters, tells him he's different, and he believes it. He wants to believe it. Because deep down, he's been starving for that feeling his whole life. But Jung warned, what you're feeling isn't recognition, it's projection. She isn't loving you. She's loving the story she's written around you. You're not a man in her life. You're a character in her mind. And when your lines go off script, when your real self shows up and doesn't match the myth, she doesn't adapt. She replaces you. And it wrecks you, not because you did something wrong, but because you thought it was real. You mistook her fantasy for connection, her desire for understanding. You thought she chose you, but she chose a dream. You were just the closest body that fit the outline. When it ends, you're left confused, hollow, angry. You question everything. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? But the truth is brutal. You stopped playing the part. You stepped out of the illusion, and that's when the fantasy collapsed. This is the trap Jung tried to expose, that men don't just suffer from women's projections, they participate in them, they perform for them, they build their identity around being chosen by them. And when that performance falls apart, they don't just lose the woman, they lose the version of themselves they created to please her. It's not love. It's a stage. And unless you wake up, you'll spend your life auditioning, always trying to win a role you were never meant to play. There is a way out. But Jung didn't promise it would be easy. He called it individuation, a word that sounds clean and clinical, but the truth behind it is anything but. Individuation is the brutal, lonely process of becoming whole, of facing the parts of yourself you've buried, the weak, the angry, the afraid, the broken. It's not about fixing yourself to be more lovable. It's about stripping away everything that was never really you. The roles, the masks, the endless attempts to be what someone else wanted. Individuation demands honesty, the kind that burns. It's not something you do to impress anyone. It's something you do when you're finally tired of lying to yourself. Most men never start that journey. Why would they? The world rewards performance. Be nice, be useful, be safe, be what she wants, be what your parents expect, be the provider, be the protector, be anything except real. But Jung said real manhood doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself, from standing alone, not because no one wants you, but because you no longer need their permission to exist. Individuation teaches you to sit in silence, to feel the emptiness you've been running from, to stop chasing applause and start listening to the voice you've ignored all your life. That voice doesn't shout. It whispers. It asks hard questions. It pulls you inward into the parts of yourself you never wanted to look at. And when you finally go there, when you stay, when you stop running, that's when something shifts. You realize you don't need to be needed. You don't need to be chosen to have worth. You don't need her to see you for you to exist. And in that moment, you become dangerous, not because you're violent or cold, but because you're free from her story, free from your past, free from the game. This is what Jung meant when he said, individuation requires you to die before you die. You have to let the false self burn. Only then can something real emerge. Not a role, not a character, a man, whole, awake, unapologetic. It's not love, it's a stage. And unless you wake up, you'll spend your life auditioning, always trying to win a role you were never meant to play. Here's the part that stings the most. No one took your identity from you. You gave it away, bit by bit. Every time you said yes when you wanted to say no. Every time you agreed just to avoid conflict. Every time you shaped yourself into something softer, safer, more acceptable, just to be loved. You call it compromise. Jung called it self-betrayal. He saw men twisting themselves into shapes no one ever asked for, smiling when they were angry, nodding when they disagreed, performing emotions they didn't feel. And why? Because they believed that love was something you earn by disappearing, that if they could just become the right kind of man, the one she wanted, the one she dreamed of, the one who never made her uncomfortable, then maybe they'd finally be enough. But here's the irony. The more you become what she wants, the less she wants you. The very thing you hope will make her love you, your obedience, your predictability, your availability, becomes the exact reason she starts pulling away. Why? Because she senses what you're trying to hide, that you've abandoned your own center, that there's no fire left, no boundaries, no soul. Jung warned that a man who loses touch with his own psyche becomes a puppet, not just to women, but to culture, to expectations, to fear. He stops being a man. He becomes a mask, and eventually, the mask becomes so convincing that even he forgets who he was before he put it on. But here's the truth buried under all the pretending. The world doesn't need another agreeable man. It needs a real one. And you don't find him by bending. You find him by standing, even if you have to stand alone. Solitude isn't punishment, it's purification. Jung said that until a man embraces being alone, he will never be free, because as long as you fear the silence of your own mind, you'll keep filling it with other people's noise, with her approval, with their opinions, with roles that make you feel useful but keep you hollow. The truth is, most men would rather be accepted than authentic. They would rather perform than confront. They would rather live inside someone else's story than write their own. And this is why they keep repeating the same relationship, the same heartbreak, the same betrayal, different faces, same pattern. Because they haven't yet become whole inside themselves. Individuation, real inner work, doesn't give you a better performance. It takes away the need to perform at all. And that's when something incredible happens. You stop chasing women. Not because you don't love them, but because you don't need them to tell you who you are anymore. You stop begging to be understood. You stop apologizing for your strength. You become a man not defined by what he gets, but by what he carries. You carry your own soul. And in doing so, you become something rare, something solid, something unshakable, not loud, not arrogant, but rooted. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. You embody it. And here's what most men never understand. When you stop trying to be chosen, when you finally choose yourself, that's when you become magnetic. Not because you're trying, but because you're whole. And wholeness is something the world doesn't know how to ignore. So what happens when you do the work? When you stop performing, stop projecting, stop needing someone else to carry your soul? You stop looking for a goddess to worship or a savior to fix, and you stop being one too. Real love, the kind Jung pointed toward, doesn't come from fantasy. It doesn't start with a script. It starts with truth. Two people, no masks, no illusions, no unfinished business being dragged into someone else's arms. She won't try to change your script because she's burned hers too. She won't ask you to perform because she's done performing. She won't treat you like a missing puzzle piece because she's already made peace with her own missing parts. There's no desperation, no clinging, no manipulation dressed up as romance. There's just presence, mutual recognition, two people standing side by side, not because they need each other to feel whole, but because they are whole. And that kind of love, it doesn't come from wanting, it comes from choosing. And when you finally meet someone like that, you'll know, because she won't fall in love with the role you play. She'll see the man you really are and stay anyway. Don't expect applause when you become that man. Jung said it plainly. The individuated man is not welcomed by society. He is feared, misunderstood, labeled cold, distant, arrogant. Not because he's any of those things, but because he can no longer be controlled. You see, most people are playing roles, and when you stop playing yours, you disrupt the whole performance. You become a mirror, and people hate mirrors when they reflect something they're not ready to face. Your presence alone will make them uncomfortable. You won't have to say a word. They'll feel it. You're not predictable anymore. You don't flinch to please. You don't bend to be accepted. You've stepped off the stage, and now they don't know what to do with you, especially the women still trapped by their own projections. They'll say you're too distant, too intense, too in your head. But what they really mean is, they can't mold you. You've become unshapable, unmanipulable, and that scares people because it forces them to look at themselves. It breaks the illusion they've spent their lives defending. But don't shrink. This discomfort is proof that you've stepped into something real, something rare, something untouchable.